But right now, let's talk some MMA with Dave Simon, of course, the host of Ringside Report Radio, Wednesdays and Friday nights here on TSN 690. You can also check out the website, ringsidereport.net, and you can follow them on Dave Simon MMA on Twitter. Now, Dave, usually prior to the program, my ignorance shows when I ask you what's going on in MMA, and we do a little, I would say 90-second prep.
Yeah.
And just so I sound halfway informed.
Yeah.
We did not do that this evening. We were distracted by other things here in the studio. So I'm going to ask you on air, what's happening in MMA? That's not the answer I was looking for.
I got to say, my jiu-jitsu game is improving very, very well. I've been lifting a lot of weights this week.
Okay.
I've been trying to get my strength up.
What is happening at the professional level, Dave? Professional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You got to be specific with me, you never know.
My fault.
Well, UFC on Fuel TV 7 will go down in 6 days' time on Saturday. It'll be in London, England at the Wembley Arena. The UFC Interim Bantamweight Championship will be on the line. Renan Barão, a Brazilian fighter, taking on American Michael McDonald.
Why is it interim?
Because the current champion, Dominic Cruz, is out with a knee injury. He's been out for a while now and probably won't be back for...
Will he get an automatic title shot?
Months. Dominic Cruz, when he comes back? Well, yeah, he's the champion. So whoever... I think that Dominic's first fight back will be against the interim champion, whoever that may be, whether it's Renan Barão, whether it's Michael McDonald, whether it's Ivan Menjivar, whoever the 135-pound kingpin is at the time will get the shot against Dominic Cruz because, they're the interim champion. You are not the number one guy until you beat that number one guy. As the great Ric Flair once said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And Dominic Cruz, injured or not, is still the man in the UFC bantamweight division. So a pretty good UFC card coming up Saturday afternoon out of England, which is always fun for me. I get to wake up on a Saturday morning. Facebook prelims start at noon, and I think the TV show starts at 2 o'clock or maybe 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. So a nice afternoon UFC to get you ready for 2 weeks' time when UFC 157, the UFC comes back on pay-per-view. That'll be Saturday, February 23rd. Ronda Rousey defending against Liz Carmouche, the first women's title fight in the UFC. So that's pretty much what's going on in the world of MMA.
Any news to do with the card coming here next month? Anything coming out of that?
Yeah, nothing major. I mean, everything is pretty much set. Sean Pearson got hurt. He's going to be out of his fight with Rick Story. Quinn Mulhern stepped up instead, but that's not a huge deal. That's not a main card type of thing. But everything is pretty much as expected. March 16th at the Bell Center, UFC 158. George St. Pierre is ready. Nick Diaz is ready. And, everything is good so far, which, no news is good news when a card is all set and ready to go.
Now, we know that Diaz is a charismatic guy. Is he hyping this thing? Is he talking at all prior yet, or is it still too early?
Well, yeah, he was here, I guess it was a couple weeks ago. He was here in Montreal to do the pre-fight press conference, right. And he was very interesting. He was very talkative, and he was hyping the fight. We haven't heard anything from Nick Diaz since. We haven't really heard anything from George St. Pierre since, but they did their job, and they were fun to talk to. I talked to Nick Diaz a lot on that day, and he was in really good spirits, which is not ordinary for him. He's not usually the most talkative, kind of happy guy in front of media, but he was on that day. So it's an interesting Nick Diaz coming into this fight. And George St. Pierre, who's usually very nice and very polite and stuff, he seemed just kind of annoyed on that day. So the roles reversed for the fight, and it's going to be interesting.
Do you think for Diaz it's because he's coming off a ban? He's just kind of grateful to be back, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. He, he's been fighting since he was 18 years old, and this is the longest time he's ever had in between fights. And he's talked about that for a long time. He's never really got, the recognition that he felt he deserved. He never got the big fight and all the attention that he felt he deserved. And he'd been fighting every 2-3 months, maybe 6 months, but now a full year. And, well, actually a year and a month, about 13 months in between fights for Nick Diaz. It's given him time to rest, relax, heal old wounds, and come into the fight 100% healthy. So I think he's actually happy to have tested positive for those marijuana metabolites that had him suspended for a year.
All right. And in terms of Dana White, anything coming out from him lately? And obviously he's a guy that's always talking about the future and of MMA and UFC's role in that. And obviously recently we had all those Strikeforce members coming over and integrated now into the UFC. I mean, what's the company line coming out with lately?
There's an interesting trend in the UFC of guys dropping down from 155 and getting immediate title shots at 145. Frankie Edgar, about 6 days ago at UFC 156, was, Frankie Edgar, as you know, the former lightweight champion, 155 pounds. He lost the title to Benson Henderson in a very close decision. He was given an immediate rematch. The decision was even closer, a split decision going to Benson Henderson. So Edgar had some, choices to make. Would he stay at 155? Would he drop to 145? He dropped to 145. He fought Jose Aldo 6 days ago. I thought Frankie won the fight. The judges scored it for Aldo. It was a very, very close decision, again, with Frankie Edgar coming out on the losing end. And after the fight, Dana White says at the post-fight press conference that he got a text from Anthony Pettis. Now, Anthony Pettis is one of the best 155-pounders in the world and was next in line for the UFC lightweight championship. Whoever was the winner from Benson Henderson, Gilbert Melendez in April was going to fight Anthony Pettis. But Pettis doesn't want to wait, and he sent a text to Dana White that said he wanted to fight Jose Aldo. So Pettis will be dropping down from 155, from being the number one contender at 155, and is now the number one contender at 145, and will fight Jose Aldo on August 3rd. So that, I think, is one of the biggest stories that came out of MMA over the past week since we last spoke, is that Pettis now getting the title shot against Aldo.
Obviously, the other big news out of MMA is Bellator on Spike TV. How's that going so far?
Yeah, it's going well. I mean, the ratings are doing all right, and it's a work in progress. I think that Bellator obviously is not the UFC, but they are working their way up, and they're putting on some entertaining fights. This week in Bellator on Thursday night, they have a bantamweight championship bout in their main event. Eduardo Dantas defending his Bellator bantamweight title against the tournament winner Marcos Galvao. That's going to be a very interesting fight there, and they kick off middleweight tournament, the quarterfinals of that on Thursday night. So I think Bellator is doing a good job, and it makes life a lot more interesting for me because every Thursday night now there's live fights on TV, and it's fun to watch. I mean, when you have Thursday night with some live fights and then Saturday night with some UFC, if you're an MMA fan, you're in good. You're getting a lot of fights, and Bellator is providing some good fights, some good action. We just had Alexander Shlemenko become the new Bellator middleweight champion, knocking out Michael Falcao on Thursday night. A great fight there. Shlemenko looked fantastic. So, Bellator may not have the big names that the UFC has, but they're putting on some good fights. And if you're an MMA fan, you can't help but be interested in what Bellator is doing right now.
And if you're interested in MMA, you can go to ringsidereport.net. And that is the website. Dave puts all the podcasts as well from the radio show, Ringside Report Radio, Wednesdays and Fridays here on TSN 690. Dave Simon MMA on Twitter.com or Ringside Report on Twitter if you want to follow them there. And Dave, who's on the show? What's up on Wednesday night?
Yeah, we're expecting to hear from UFC welterweight. He's going to be in the co-main event of UFC 158, Rory McDonald, a great welterweight fighting Carlos Condit here in March. He is set to join us on Wednesday night.
Canadian?
Yeah.
From See, I knew that at least.
There you go. You're learning, Matthew Ross.
Yeah. Through Dave Simon, I'm learning.
He's from out in BC, but he trains and lives here in the beautiful city of Montreal.
All right, that's coming up Wednesday night. What time are you on Wednesday?
11 o'clock. No Canadians games on Wednesday or Friday, so we're on time, 11 o'clock Wednesday and Friday. As for Wrestling Uncensored, well, that's another story.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Thank you.